Today, I wanted to talk about warning signs from a mental health standpoint that your mental health is going to decline. But I do want to preface with a couple of things before I talk about it. The first thing is that I am not giving advice to anyone. I understand that everyone's different and what works for me might not work for you. So, this is definitely not advice. And then the second thing is that the nature of what I struggle with mental health wise is quite chronic. So my mental health has declined a bit. And when I talk about my warning signs, I don't want to make it seem like I'm on the verge of a serious mental breakdown because I'm not. It's just kind of the nature of things. And I was expecting a decline at some point, and some people might say that's bad. Like, it's not good to have a self fulfilling prophecy, but I don't see it that way just because it is chronic. I think it's good to be prepared for it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But essentially, yes, my mental health has declined, and I think a big part of that is because over the last couple weeks, there were some things in my life that were triggering. But okay, so when I was younger, I was in a constant mental health crisis, and I was always told to write down my warning signs and recognize them and talk about them. But because I was always in crisis, the warning signs weren't there. Like, we were past that point. So it was hard for me to be able to recognize what they even were. But as I've grown, my mental health, I'm not in that crisis anymore, so it does ebb and flow more. So over time, I have been able to recognize my warning signs because I'm able to see the difference. So the first thing is that my anxiety becomes extremely intense, and I am an anxious person. Like, that's my baseline. I really just came out of the womb anxious. And so anxiety is always a part of my life, but it does really intensify. So I'll wake up in the morning immediately anxious before I even know where I am, like know what's going on. I'm not awake even fully. And I wake up quite panicked, and then the nature of my anxiety also becomes different. Like, instead of it being really related to specific things, it's just constant, and it's more like I become afraid of life almost. That's how it feels. I'm just afraid of everything. So that's a warning sign. Another thing is I have experienced trauma, and how do I put this? When I'm doing well, I still will have memories of trauma and struggle with it, but it's much easier to move on from. Like, if I struggle with that throughout the day, I can just easily be like, don't think about that and keep going. Whereas when things start to decline, it becomes harder to do that. I become more impacted by it, and motivation kind of goes out the window, which is really easy for me to recognize since I'm doing school. So before, I was really excited about school, and now it's very hard to get through it. My point of telling you all this is that because I have those warning signs that I can recognize, I'm able to do my best to counteract them to hopefully prevent things going very far down. So, with the anxiety, for example, I'll pinpoint the specific warning signs. And there's a truck outside my room, if you can hear it, I'm sorry. But I'll pinpoint the specific warning signs, so anxiety, and I'll do what I can to help anxiety. So before I started school, I was journaling every single day consistently, and that does help me. Like, it helps me process my thoughts, and it kind of gives me that release. But when I started school, I stopped doing that just because I was tired. Like, school's a lot of reading and writing. It's hard in my spare time to want to continue to write. But I changed how I do it. So I started journaling in the morning opposed to at night, which I previously did. So I started to incorporate that back in my routine. I have meditated. I'm not very frequent with it, but that's just like an example of I'm trying to incorporate certain things that I've let go of that help my anxiety. This truck is so annoying. I might have to stop. I'm gonna stop and wait till it goes away. Okay, sorry, that truck was literally here for a million years. I don't even remember what I was saying. I think I was talking about. Okay, actually, I do know what I was saying. So, another thing that I've done is just try to do like little mood promoting things. So, in the morning when I'm having my coffee, I started opening my blinds, which I don't know if that actually helps. I think it kind of does. So, I have a lot of sensory issues. I don't actually like light, but yes, I'll open them for a bit to do things like that. Another thing I've done is increased therapy. I don't go to therapy weekly just because I'm broke. So I was going every third week, but then I increased it to bi-weekly. And I think that's really important too, is being honest with people, because in the past I would wait until like things hit the fan, like things were very bad before I would communicate them. But now I try to be honest at the time. So, like in my appointments, I reported the increase in anxiety and kind of was able to talk about my fears around it. So, I've done things like that. Like, I'm taking the warning signs and I'm trying my best to deal with them. And another thing that kind of goes along with this is mood dependent behavior. I really struggle with this. I don't know how to really struggle, like feeling wise, and do things anyway. So I'm still in school. In the past, I would have dropped out, which now seems kind of ridiculous, but I was just very mood dependent. If I was so anxious, I would stay home. Like I wouldn't leave my house, which is probably why I had agoraphobia. But and I mean, this is so dependent on the situation. Like, sometimes it's not always great to push yourself, like, too far. So it does depend. But for me, I just can't keep doing that in life. Like, I can't, because this is chronic problem, I can't just give up every time I don't feel well, because I'll never get anywhere. So it's about feeling not very well and doing things anyway. And with school, that's very hard, but I'm doing it. And one thing that I do is set a timer. So I set a timer for 2 hours, and that's the rule for myself, is I have to at least work 2 hours every single day. And this helps me because I will know that after the 2 hours is up, I don't have to do anything else. That's what I tell myself. Work for these 2 hours, and then if you don't want to, you don't have to anymore. You can do whatever you want. You can lie in bed, you can watch Netflix, whatever your heart desires at the end of these 2 hours. But having that timer, like when it starts, I think is good motivation. I also do it in the morning, like after I'm done my coffee, I start my 2 hours so I'm not procrastinating all day. Like, I know that if I lie in bed all day, it's not going to get better, and then it's just going to be harder to do later on. So I started doing things like that. Another thing too with anxiety is I really would not do anything if I was that level of anxious. And the other day, I was so anxious and I went to class, which I never would have done before. And honestly, like, it was not good. I was freaking out, and like I was talking to my prof about something, and I was actually on the verge of tears because I was so anxious. And I was shaking so much, and like, I'm not gonna lie, I was like embarrassed kind of after, because I'm like, oh my god, I look like I'm really emotionally not stable, because what I was talking about does not coincide with this kind of reaction that I'm having. Um, and then in the past, even if I had pushed myself and done that, I would have been like felt shame, so I wouldn't have kept going. But it's pushing myself to do that anyway. Like, I'm committed to do things if I'm anxious anyway. Like, if I go to class and have a serious panic attack, I'm like gonna leave. But if I'm not, like, okay, I'll just sit there and shake. And it's gonna be hard, but because I've done that so much in the past, I was just training my brain that it was so scary and unmanageable and I couldn't do it. So, those are the two things, like working on the warning signs and trying to interact with them in a way that like makes things better, and then not having mood dependent behavior and doing things anyway. And like I know that it's okay to adjust that too. Like it's okay as long as I'm doing things anyway, it's okay to adjust them based on how I'm doing. Like let's say things get so bad, maybe I will say not 2 hours, 1 hour, things like that, if that makes sense. So, yes, I hope everyone is okay. Like, I live in Canada, so it's that time of year where everything gets cold and gloomy, and I think a lot of people start to struggle with their mental health. I think it is quite a common time for relapse, like, especially if you have seasonal affective disorder and stuff. So, I really do hope you're okay. And yeah, that's my little update. I hope it wasn't depressing. But yeah, that's everything. Goodbye. I'm never gonna know how to end this.